Okay, this is the tank Q&A for February 24th, 2022. We've got some questions we're going to answer. And yeah, if you've got any more questions about tank stuff, let me know in the chat and we'll answer those as well. So, do you see any large shifts in tanking coming in the next patch? Chef, thanks for the question. There's going to be a little shift in stuff because weapon enchants no longer proc gear sets. So in Kratis becomes more difficult for non-DKs. Elemental Catalyst is now impossible for Dragon Knight tanks. So there's like little things that are going to change, definitely. In terms of next patch, there's some new gear sets. Nazare, Nunatech potentially now. We need to look more into that now it's been changed. You've got the Turning Tide gear set is potentially going to be quite useful. So there's like a lot of things in there that are going to bring some changes through next patch. Being able to proc gear sets with Power Bash, that's a bit like, there's little changes. Burning Embers on a Dragon Knight being a heal over time. There are little things that are coming in that are probably going to make our life easier again. Like I think tanking is in a very, very good place generally. And it's going to get better. It's like getting better. So it's doing all right. We're doing all right in terms of tanking. First question we got here from Ace. I have a question. I wonder if an experienced tank could answer. Is it critical to be at the resistance cap for vet content? And if so, which items, traits, etc. do you use to get there if you're not on a Nord DK? So the quick answer to this question is it's not essential to be at the resistance cap for vet content in the Elder Scrolls. So vet content, yeah, you want to have some resistances, don't get me wrong. But like, if you've got 28,000 buffed resistances, the difference between 28,000 and 33,000, which is the cap, is a very, very tiny amount. Because we're able to mitigate so much damage by blocking. The only time that resistances have a huge impact is when we're dealing with unblocked damage. So when we drop our block, resistances have a bigger impact on the amount of damage we take when we're unblocked. As soon as we block, those resistances are doing very, very little to impact the amount of damage we're taking. So for most tanks, this does mean that resistances aren't that important because we're blocking most damage. We're blocking most things that are a problem. So it's not an issue. So that's the way you've got to look at it. And yeah, so resistance cap is not essential. I run most content on 25 to 28k resistances. There's almost nowhere that I'm using 33k. And if I do, it's because it's just an extremely high value of damage. And to get my resistances up, I'll use the Master's Sword and Board. Because when you use the Master's Sword and Board, the Puncture and Remedy set, when you use your taunt, it procs a heal. And the value of the heal is also the amount of resistances you get. So you get a nice boost. So yeah, resistance cap, not essential. When I'm talking about 25k resistances, I'm talking buffed, yeah. I'm talking buffed. Like, I don't use resistance CP. I don't use reinforced gear. I very rarely need, like, I don't use any monster sets to buff resistances. Like, you can do most content in this game at 25 to 28k, because that's just the normal amount that you'll have with a armor buff. You've also got to remember that a lot of times in combat, you'll have minor resolve from the healer, from combat prayer, from things like that. There's a lot of things that, there's a few things that give you that minor resolve as well, and you're quite often in range of that. So you'll have minor resolve on top of your major resolve, which is like another 3k resistances that you usually don't account for. So it's worth considering those as well to add on to the number that you've got when you buffed up. You're probably going to need to add another 3k. So there we go. Okay, question number 2. Second question. How are Nightblade tanks nowadays? Thinking about taking an old Nightblade healer and converting him into a tank, mostly just for vet dungeons and stuff. So, Nightblade tanks are very good at actually tanking. They're good at being tanks because they can take a lot of damage. They've got some good buffs and debuffs. The problem is they're not very useful for a group unless it's a stamina group. But this isn't really much of an issue for 4-man content. Like, for 4-man content, it's not a huge issue to use a Nightblade because you don't really need to truly optimize dungeon groups that much. The only reason you wouldn't use a Nightblade is because it's a bit easier to use a DK for dungeon content. It's a bit easier to use a Warden for dungeon content. But there's nothing wrong with using a Nightblade. Like, Nightblades are good for dungeon content because every class can tank and every class can do dungeons, and we've all got access to chains, we've got access to immobilizations with Pulsar and Blockade. So yeah, you can tank on the Nightblade if you want to. There's no issues there. So you hear what you said? I said if you've got any questions, mate, just let us know in the chat. Obviously, you said you're still trying to figure out your tank. If there's anything specific you want to know, just let us know, and we'll try and answer any questions you got. Okay, next question. How do I tank the Dragon Breaths in VSS? I usually dodge them, but if I don't have any stamina for that, how do I not die? So, the trick to doing the Dragon Breath in VSS is to dodge roll 2 seconds into the Dragon's Breath. Roll dodge backwards. As soon as the Dragon Breath ends, you do a heavy attack. You wait for the Dragon to do a heavy attack to you. You follow it up with your own heavy attack. This is called heavy after a heavy. This is my number one tip for sustain. Heavy after a heavy. If you're struggling for sustain in any fight, put on the Engine Guardian monster set. Put on a sustain monster set is always the go-to, because there's no point running like an Encratis monster set if you're always dead. Like, use something that's going to give you a little bit of sustain. It's not worth using a 5-piece gear set for sustain when you've got 2-piece gear sets that offer you enough where you should be able to sustain. You should also look at your jewelry and your enchants. If you want better sustain, infused Magicka recovery, infused stamina cost reduction, 1 infused block cost reduction, make sure you've got some sturdy gear in there, things like that. And that's really going to help you a lot. And also, your weapon enchants, infused, absorb stamina for all classes apart from a DK. On your one-hander, if you're a DK, charged one-hander with Poison Glyph, great sustain. There you go. That is how you survive. So it's about getting those heavy attacks off. You've got to time your heavy attacks, and people forget this. Heavy after a heavy, VSS especially, heavy straight after the Dragon Breath. Heavy straight after a heavy attack. No problem with sustain if you do that. Next question. On Xbox, what is the best way to time Heavens in VAS Plus 2? You go on the internet and you search for a countdown timer that you can just press reset quickly. And then you want to time. Every time the Heavens ends, you press a 30, if you want a 32-second timer. So every 32 seconds, Heavens is triggered. Sometimes there'll be a Dragon Breath, or if there's other mechanics going on, that will happen first. So there might be a Dragon Breath, there might be a jump, there might be a fire phase if it's in execute. But the Heavens phase happens every 32 seconds after the last one ends. So once it ends, timer, 32 seconds, you know it's going to happen. So for Xbox and PlayStation, if you want to time the Heavens, you can get some kind of timer on your phone, 32 seconds, type it in, press start. As soon as it ends, lap or refresh, whatever you've got on your phone, and just time it like that, 32 seconds. Looking at the chat, we've got some questions. Hello, Murphy. Beginner tank. Use Earthgore monster set. Yornakun on the body, Powerful Assault on the back bar, Master Sword on board and shield. What should I do or change to improve? I'm doing vet dungeons and they're getting kind of hard. Okay, so first of all, having PA just on your back bar is an instant struggle. If you can, use 2 body pieces, the hands and the waist, because that will help you kind of have your PA active more often. In terms of survivability, Earthgore's not really doing a lot for you, if I'm going to be honest. You want to focus on high magic recovery to get yourself more healing. If you're on a Dragon Knight, spamming Igneous Shield more often. So more mag recovery, more Igneous Shields. That is your priority if you're on a Dragon Knight tank, because also that gives more sustain. Using something like Earthgore, if you go and look at the tooltip for Earthgore, it's actually very, very weak for tanks, and it ticks every 2 seconds. The healing's really low. It's not really going to save you. If you take a big hit of damage, the thing that's going to save you is hitting Igneous Shield, hitting Green Dragon Blood, hitting a Vigor for a heal over time or something like that. Those are going to be more impactful than something like Earthgore. And using a monster set like Engine Guardian is going to be more beneficial than using something like Earthgore, because it's just so weak on a tank nowadays. I don't really suggest it's that worthwhile to use it. I always just, my go-to is Engine Guardian every day of the week. It's just, if I'm having a problem with survival, the reason I'm struggling to survive is because I'm running out of stamina or magicka. It's not because of my health, because if I've got magicka, I can heal. If I've got stamina, I can roll dodge. If I've got those things, then my health is fine. If I run out of either of those things, it becomes a massive problem very, very quickly, because then I haven't got the tools to survive. Your tools to survival isn't having more health or having healing. It's to have more Magicka and Stamina Sustain, so then you can keep yourself alive by roll dodging, by blocking, by healing, by heals over time. Do you know what I mean? By shielding. So those are the main important things that you should focus on rather than focusing on, I need a healing monster set that procs very, very infrequently with a really low heal and those kinds of things. That's probably your best bet. I was told that Yola and PA was meta. There is no... If you're doing dungeons, there is no meta. The best thing you can do is go onto the Tank Club website and look for my dungeon tank build. And there is a wide selection of different gear options. There's a selection of monster sets. There's a selection of mythic items. There's a selection of weapon sets, body piece sets. There's everything. And you can just choose 2 gear sets. You can choose a mythic item if you want. And there's so many different ways to set up a dungeon tank build. There is no one meta. PA and Yolnahkrin is not the meta. It's an option. But using Drake's Rush and PA is just as good. Using PA and Olorim is the... If you were trying to maximize the meta, it would be using the Spulder of Ruin with PA on the body and Olorim on the weapons and jewelry. That would be the meta if we were going to focus on that. Because that's the highest amount of weapon and spell damage you can give to people. That's the biggest way of completely buffing your group. But is it needed? Not really. Not always. It's not that vitally important. So, there you go. Okay, next question that we've got just here. Can someone explain VKA Hard Mode last boss, the third phase? The heavy attack. It spawns an AoE underneath me every time it hits me. So to position it correctly, I need to roll dodge into a new position as soon as I see the heavy attack coming. Then go back to the original position, dodge the new heavy attack onto the existing AoE to stack them. But no matter how early I dodge, I always spawn in the pre-roll dodge position. So... VKA Hard Mode last boss. There is the mechanic where when the boss heavy attacks on the bottom floor in Hard Mode, it will drop a pool on the floor. It's like a poison AoE thing. And if you don't stack them to a certain point, then the whole room becomes filled with the AoEs. And then eventually they'll start to clear, but then there's nowhere for your group to go, and your group needs to have some area to stand in. So the best thing you can do is take the boss next to a wall to start with. And as soon as the heavy attack animation starts, do a roll dodge into the wall, but stand next to the wall so you don't really move. So you just roll dodge on the spot against the wall. That drops the AoE, you step out of it. The boss goes to do the next heavy attack. As soon as the heavy attack starts to channel, you do the roll dodge in the wall and you step out of it. And that way you can stack them. So there's only half an AoE on the floor because the other half's in the wall. And they're all stacked on top of each other and it's really quick to walk out. That's the best way to deal with VKA Hard Mode on the bottom floor. There is one thing you want to keep yourself aware of, though, is once you've got a stack of about 6 to 8 of the AoEs, you don't want to keep roll dodging on top of that because the damage starts to ramp up because there's more and more and more AoEs stacked up. You'll start to take a ton of damage and you're already taking a lot of damage anyway. So once you've got 6 to 8 pulls stacked, you want to move the boss a little bit across and start a new stack and do the same thing. Now, the problems will occur if you roll dodge at different times every time, then you're going to have AoEs everywhere because they'll spawn at different places and different points. You've got to try and roll dodge at the same time every time and make the AoE land where you've roll dodged to rather than where you started. And that means you've got to roll dodge as soon as you see the heavy attack animation, and you've got to roll dodge to the same spot and roll dodge at the same time. So it requires quite a lot of attention. You need to be focused, you need to be attentive to getting those roll dodges in the wall on the same spot really, really nice and quickly. Times when this can become a problem is on console. So if you're on Xbox, if you're on PlayStation, more so PS4 and Xbox One, there are some latency issues when you kind of play on those older consoles, and there's some FPS issues. So when you're seeing the heavy attack animation, it might already be 1 or 2 or 3 seconds delayed, and that means when you do the dodge roll, the AoE spawns where you started your dodge roll, and that creates a huge problem. There is not really anything that you or I could do about that because it's mostly about latency. It's mostly about those FPS problems that will occur on those old consoles because, unfortunately, the way that the game is now, and especially in that trial, I've had real bad FPS drops in Kind's Aegis Hard Mode myself on PC with a really, really high-powered PC. That happens on PC. So on console, running on a really, really low-powered Xbox One or PS4, you're going to come up with those problems much, much sooner. So yeah, you just have to work with what you've got and you just have to try your very best. If you can, stack them against the wall. Try to avoid the stairs though. So on console, because you will have these problems, stand against the wall, Try to roll dodge into a stack. If you can't, then you can't. Try to position them across the wall and then move to the other side of the room, position them across the wall, and then switch back to the other side again. And try and do it that way. Keep them away from the thing. If you want to be like a top-level tank, the only way you can prepare for doing that every patch to patch, is to make sure you've got every possible gear set for supports. So, like, tanks should have had EC before we started using it. Tanks should have Zen and MK. Tanks should have the new gear set, Turning Tide, when it comes out, and the new monster sets. Like, things can change like that really quickly. And it can be like, because things can become a tank thing out of nowhere. So it's always best just to have every support set collected, at least collected in your collections, your set collections. Maybe not crafted. Like, you don't need to have Zen stuff. I mean, you maybe have the purple jewelry if you can get it, but like, you don't need all the weapons and stuff. Like, just craft those when you need them, kind of thing. Or MK. Like, there's no point in having that. You can just go. You can go and collect MK quite easily. So have that collected, ready to go. But yeah, I would say, if you want to be prepared as a tank, just always make sure you've got transmute crystals, you've got keys, undaunted keys, and you've got every, like, current meta and next patch's meta sets collected and farmed and ready to go, just because you never know. Like I say, Zen. Like, Zen might not be a tank set now, and it's probably not gonna be. But you never know when they might change Zen to maybe make it easier to proc. For example, there might be something switched and it becomes easier, and then all of a sudden, boom, main tank set, because the main tank hasn't got anything to do in this trial, so you're going to run it. You know what I mean? And you have to kind of keep that thought there ready to go, because things can change very, very quickly. And especially when it comes to support sets, like Elemental Catalyst came on a tank very quickly, because we hit a meta where sustain sets were like not needed at all, because it was a bug. Like, that we didn't realize it was a bug, but it was a Magicka Steel bug that meant everyone was getting tons of Magicka back from Magicka Steel, more than they were supposed to. And then it kind of happened that we were like, well, you don't need Worm Cult. You don't need any of this stuff. So we're simply just going to make it nice and easy. We're going to put EC on the tank, because you just need to do these real simple things. And all of a sudden, like, everyone's going, well, we need EC on a tank. Oh, shit. But then, like, looking at it, EC is not that big of a thing on a tank now, because it's not easy to keep 100% uptime. It's not easy to do an AoE EC. You know what I mean? I have a question about the second boss at Vka. Sometimes when I do the shadow, it starts to throw you into spot, lightning, and drain my HP before I can block all shadows. If you're getting stuck in a lightning AoE, then that's you moving too slow. Like, mechanics can happen fast in that trial, but if you're getting stuck in a lightning AoE and then going into the mechanic, you should have been out of that lightning AoE much, much faster. Because as soon as you see the boss move, you should be moving away from it. You should be trying to position yourself quickly, if that's what you mean. In terms of not being able to block all of the shades, it depends on what if you're on console or a really low-performing PC, you're going to have issues with the shades. That is something that will happen. If it's just a case of sometimes the shades are going through your character, you block it and it goes through your character, that's a bug that's been in the game forever. So there's a couple of different issues with that situation. For me personally, as soon as, because there's a sound when that mechanic's going to happen. When the tank mechanic, the shade mechanic's going to happen, there's a sound. It's like you can hear it start to happen. I always take a step away from my group when that happens. Anyway, I take a step back and I'm turn myself around and I've got my back to my group. So I always keep my group on the entrance and they move side to side. They don't go around the boss. They move to the side. They move to the side. They move back. They move like that. They don't move around the boss. So that always means that as a priority, every time I go to the ground, I face the exit and I block, and I can move myself quickly if it's in the diagonal positions, or if it's straight ahead, I'm already in position. So I've saved myself there, and I've saved my group by doing that. So that's one of those things. It's the best way to do it. If your group are moving around the boss, then that's ridiculous. Like, there's no need to do it. You just keep them straight, and then you can position yourself much, much easier.